The last thing I saw was my own office door closing. But I wasn't the one standing behind it. My name is Lila Thompson. I am 29 years old, and I never believed my own sister would try to erase my entire existence. It was a cold Monday morning in the city, the kind where the wind bites through your coat, yet the chill I felt inside was far worse. I had been out for 2 weeks with a severe bout of pneumonia, huddled in my apartment while my sister Vanessa promised to handle things. I trusted her. She was my flesh and blood, the person who brought me soup and dimmed the lights. But when I finally felt strong enough to return to work, I found the locks had been changed. I stood in the hallway of Thompson Associates, my breath hitching in my chest. Through the glass partition of my private office, I saw a stranger sitting at my mahogany desk. My nameplate was gone. My potted orchid, the one I had nurtured for 3 years, was missing. It felt like a bad dream, the kind where you scream but no sound comes out. I reached for my ID badge, but the sensor turned red. I was a ghost in my own life. I stood frozen as the HR manager, a woman I had shared coffee with for years, walked toward me with a look of deep pity. "Lila? What are you doing here?" she whispered, glancing around nervously. I told her I was back from medical leave, but she pulled me into a side conference room. "Lila, are you aware your resignation has been processed and signed?" My heart dropped into my stomach. I hadn't resigned. I loved my job as a senior analyst. She pulled a file and showed me the document. There it was, my signature, or a hauntingly perfect imitation of it, dated 3 days ago. The letter stated I was moving abroad for a once-in-a-lifetime study opportunity, and that I requested no farewell parties to avoid the pain of saying goodbye. Vanessa's forgery was flawless. She had used her time taking care of me to study my handwriting, access my laptop, and dismantle my career while I lay shivering in bed with a fever. The HR manager said Vanessa had even come by to collect my personal belongings on Friday, telling everyone I was too emotional to do it myself. My life was being deleted, one signed paper at a time. The betrayal didn't stop at the office. When I called my parents, sobbing and trying to explain that I hadn't quit, my mother's voice was soft and patronizing. "Oh, Lila, honey, Vanessa told us you were feeling overwhelmed. She said the move to Europe would be the best thing for your mental health." They actually believed I was gone. Vanessa had told the family a complete fabrication, that I had been scouted by a firm in London and was leaving immediately. She told them I wanted a clean break because I was stressed. My friends had received texts from my number, sent while I was asleep or in the shower, saying I was changing my phone number and would contact them from abroad. My life was being erased piece by piece, replaced by a narrative Vanessa had written for me. She was the heroic sister, managing my move, packing my life into boxes, and shielding the family from my instability. I realized then that while I was fighting a lung infection, she was fighting a war against my identity. She hadn't just stolen my job, she had stolen my reputation, convincing everyone I loved that I was a flighty, ungrateful ghost. I checked into a temporary apartment under a different name, too afraid to go back to the home where Vanessa had a key. I had my mail forwarded, and a few days later, an envelope arrived from my bank. My hands shook as I tore it open. It was a summary of unauthorized withdrawals and new credit lines, opened in my name. Over $20,000 had been moved into accounts I didn't recognize. I saw charges for high-end boutiques, luxury rentals, and even a down payment on a car I didn't own. Despite her careful planning, Vanessa had been sloppy in her greed. I found a digital receipt for a replacement laptop she had purchased using my rewards points, delivered to an address she thought I wouldn't check. Every transaction had her digital fingerprints all over it, even if she used my login. She was living a high life on my credit while telling the world I was halfway across the Atlantic. The pattern snapped into place. This wasn't just a sisterly spat or a moment of jealousy. This was a calculated, financial, and social assassination. She wanted my money, my status, and my absence. She didn't just want to be me, she wanted me to cease to exist. As I sat in that cold, lonely apartment, memories flashed through my mind like a horror movie. I remembered Vanessa volunteering to help me manage my finances while I was ill, claiming I was too foggy from the medication to pay the bills. I remembered her insisting she hold on to my spare keys and my passport for safekeeping. Every act of kindness had been a cold, calculated move. She had been playing a long game, waiting for the moment I was most vulnerable to strike. I recalled how she would look at my designer bags or my promotion letters with a strange, tight smile. At the time, I thought it was just sibling rivalry, the kind of harmless jealousy we'd had since we were kids. But now I saw it for what it was, a hungry, desperate need to occupy the space I had built for myself. She had watched me work 60-hour weeks to earn my position, and she decided she could simply take the prize without doing the work. The realization that my own sister had sat by my bedside, stroking my hair while plotting to ruin me, made the bile rise in my throat. This wasn't an accident. It was a robbery. I knew I couldn't fight this alone. I contacted my attorney, Ms. Randall, a sharp woman who had handled my grandfather's estate. When I walked into her office, she looked at me like she'd seen a ghost. "Lila, Vanessa told me you were in London," she exclaimed. I sat down and told her everything. I showed her the bank statements, the forged resignation, and the texts I never sent. Miss Randall's face hardened. She advised me to stay quiet for now. "We need documentation, witness collection, and a full legal case," she said. "If you confront her now, she'll hide the assets or claim you harassing her. We need to be the hunters, not the prey." Our goal was clear: restore my identity, reclaim my stolen assets, and hold Vanessa accountable for every single lie. We began a secret file titled The Replacement. Ms. Randall told me to act like the unstable sister everyone thought I was, to let Vanessa feel she had won so she would become overconfident. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, staying silent while my sister wore my clothes and spent my money, but I knew that a quiet strike would be the most lethal. Before I officially moved out of my original apartment, I had secretly installed high-definition cameras disguised as wall chargers. I spent hours in my temporary room watching the live feeds on my phone. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched Vanessa enter my home. She didn't look like a grieving sister. She looked like a thief in a candy store. I watched her go through my jewelry box, trying on my grandmother's diamond earrings. She sat at my vanity, using my expensive creams and laughing into the mirror. One afternoon, she brought a neighbor over, someone I had known for years. "It's so sad," Vanessa sighed on the recording. "Lila just snapped. She left all this behind. I'm just trying to pack it up before the landlord evicts her." She was actively manipulating my neighbors, turning them against me by framing me as a deadbeat. I watched her take my birth certificate and my social security card from my desk drawer and tuck them into her purse. Every visit she made under the guise of care was being recorded in 4K resolution. The evidence of her tampering, hiding my belongings, and lying to my face was pouring in, filling a hard drive that would eventually be her undoing. The first confrontation happened sooner than I planned. Vanessa visited my temporary apartment, claiming she wanted to discuss my move abroad and check on my health. She didn't know I had a voice recorder running in my pocket and that Ms. Randall was listening via a live link. Vanessa sat on my sofa, looking perfectly poised in a coat I had bought for myself last Christmas. "Lila, you look tired," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Maybe you should just sign over the power of attorney for the apartment. It would be easier than trying to manage it from London." I confronted her calmly. I asked her why my bank account was empty. She didn't blink. She smiled and tried to gaslight me, saying I must have forgotten the gifts I gave her or the bills I asked her to pay. "You're just confused from the pneumonia, honey," she said. She actually had the nerve to pat my hand, thinking I was too weak and broken to fight back. She thought she had effectively erased my will to resist. But as I looked into her cold, calculating eyes, I felt a surge of cold fury. I wasn't weak. I was just getting started. The next day, I took the first step in reclaiming my professional life. I bypassed the local office and went straight to the corporate HR director with Ms. Randall. We presented a mountain of evidence: time-stamped video of Vanessa at my desk, my actual medical records from the hospital, and a forensic report proving the resignation signature was a forgery. I also showed the resignation email metadata, which proved it was sent from Vanessa's home IP address, not mine. The HR director's face went pale. They realized they had almost been complicit in a major identity theft. "We were led to believe you were in a crisis, Lila," he admitted. I told him I was in a crisis, but not the kind Vanessa described. HR reversed my resignation immediately. They didn't just give me my job back. They placed me on paid administrative leave to sort out the legal mess and promised to cooperate with any police investigation. I walked out of that building feeling the first breath of fresh air in weeks. Vanessa thought she had closed the door on my career, but I had just kicked it back open. The workplace twist was the first crack in her perfect facade, and I knew she'd feel the floor shaking soon. While my job was safe, my finances were a disaster. I spent the next 48 hours with a forensic accountant provided by Miss Randall. We discovered that Vanessa hadn't just taken cash. She had used my identity to secure several high-interest personal loans, claiming they were for emergency family expenses. She had essentially used my high credit score to fund a lifestyle she could never afford on her own. My credit was at a dangerous risk, and my financial life was on the line. However, her greed was her undoing. Every move she made left a paper trail a mile wide. She had used her own email as a recovery address for some of the loan applications, and she had even used my name to lease a luxury SUV, which was currently parked in her driveway. We tracked the funds from the loans directly into a secret account she had opened in a neighboring state. It was a classic web of financial deceit, but like any web, it was easy to see once the light hit it. I realized she wasn't just trying to replace me. She was trying to bankrupt me, so that I would have no resources to fight back. She wanted me penniless and discredited. Miss Randall and I began interviewing people Vanessa thought she had successfully fooled. We talked to my neighbors, who were horrified to learn that I hadn't actually moved to London. One neighbor, Mrs. Gable, testified that Vanessa had told her I was suffering from a nervous breakdown, and that was why she was moving my furniture out in the middle of the night. Even the delivery personnel at my building remembered Vanessa. One courier recalled her signing my name for a package and claiming she was managing the estate while I was away. Every story we collected stacked against her like bricks in a wall. I even found a local handyman who Vanessa had hired to change my locks. He had a copy of the work order she had signed using my name. People who had once looked at me with pity now looked at me with outrage on my behalf. They realized they had been pawns in her sick game. The social net she had cast to trap me was now being used to pull her in. Each witness was another nail in the coffin of her lies, proving that her actions were deliberate, repetitive, and malicious. Vanessa, sensing that I wasn't going away quietly, tried a desperate legal maneuver. She filed for preemptive guardianship over my affairs, citing my severe mental distress and inability to care for myself following my illness. She actually had the audacity to use my own medical history against me, claiming the pneumonia had caused hypoxic brain injury that made me delusional. It was a terrifying move. If she won, she would have total control over my life, my money, and my freedom. But she didn't know I was ready. We countered her filing within hours. Miss Randall presented the court with a mountain of documentation. The surveillance footage of her stealing my mail, the forensic audit of the forged loans, and the records of her spending my money on luxury goods. We proved her care was actually a cover for deliberate deception and malice. When the judge saw the video of Vanessa laughing while trying on my jewelry, the caring sister persona began to crumble. The court was no longer looking at a concerned relative. They were looking at a predator who had used a family member's illness as a window for theft. The guardianship attempt backfired spectacularly, putting Vanessa on the court's radar as a potential criminal. Despite the legal setbacks, Vanessa didn't stop. She tried to gain sympathy publicly, framing herself as the long-suffering sister on social media. She posted photos of us from childhood with captions like, "Praying for my sister's mental health. It's so hard to watch someone you love lose their way." She was trying to poison the well, making sure that if I ever did tell the truth, people would think I was just having an episode. Her followers left comments about how brave she was and how ungrateful I must be. I stayed silent. My friends begged me to respond, to defend myself. But Miss Randall was firm. Let her talk. Every lie she tells in public is more evidence for us. We meticulously recorded every post, every comment, and every interview she gave to local blogs. We even found a live stream where she claimed I had stolen money from our parents, a lie so bold it made my blood boil. I didn't engage online. I didn't post a single word. I knew that in a court of law, proof beats noise every single time. I let her weave her own noose out of digital threads. As we dug deeper into the financial records, I discovered a second, even darker layer to the betrayal. Vanessa had convinced a close family friend, Mr. Henderson, to transfer a small piece of inherited property into her name. This was a lakeside cabin that our grandfather had intended for both of us, but the deed had been tied up in probate. Vanessa had told Mr. Henderson that I had signed over my share to her because I didn't want the tax burden while living in London. She had even produced a notarized letter, another forgery, stating that I wanted her to have full ownership. When I called Mr. Henderson, he was devastated. "Lila, she told me you were so happy to let her have it," he cried. Evidence of coercion and fraud emerged as we looked at how she had pressured him to sign the papers while I was still in the hospital. This wasn't just about my current bank account anymore. She was trying to strip away my entire inheritance. She was systematically taking everything our family had built for our future. The greed was bottomless, and the betrayal was now generational. My sister wasn't just replacing me, she was erasing my legacy. In the midst of the darkness, a secret ally emerged. Our cousin, Mia, who had always been close to Vanessa, came forward. She had been staying with Vanessa and had seen the behind-the-scenes of the operation. Mia had overheard Vanessa bragging on the phone about how easy it was to play the victim, and how I was too stupid to notice the missing money. Mia brought me a folder of documents she had salvaged from Vanessa's trash. Practice sheets where Vanessa had been tracing my signature, and a list of my passwords written on a notepad. Her testimony about Vanessa's manipulation added a crucial layer to my case. "I couldn't stay silent anymore, Lila," Mia told me, her eyes filled with tears. "She's not the person we thought she was." Having someone from within Vanessa's inner circle testify was the turning point. It proved that her actions weren't a result of a misunderstanding or stress, but were premeditated and cruel. Vanessa's web was finally starting to unravel from the inside out. With Mia's evidence, we had more than just a financial case. We had a criminal conspiracy. Seeing the walls close in, Vanessa doubled down on her social media campaign. She began a series of frantic posts portraying me as unstable and dangerous. She claimed I had been abandoning my family duties, and that I was threatening her. She even went as far as to post a blurry photo of a woman who looked like me standing outside her house at night, claiming I was stalking her. It was a total lie. I was at Ms. Randall's office at that exact time. I remained composed, not engaging with her online circus. I let her followers scream into the void while I sat with my legal team, filing the actual police reports. My reputation among strangers was being dragged through the mud, but I knew the truth was a slow-moving freight train that she couldn't stop. Every time she posted a lie, we added it to our defamation exhibit. She thought she was winning the war of public opinion, but she was actually just providing a written confession of her malice. I felt a strange sense of calm. I knew that when the hammer finally dropped, the noise she made wouldn't matter anymore. Vanessa's most desperate lie involved my health. She submitted a series of records to the court claiming I had a history of health issues preventing me from managing my affairs. She tried to suggest I had a chronic condition that made me prone to blackouts and memory loss. This was her attempt to explain away the financial discrepancies. If I forgot spending the money, she could claim I was the one who was confused. However, my actual doctors provided complete, unedited records proving I was physically and mentally fit, aside from the temporary bout of pneumonia. They testified that I had no history of memory issues or mental instability. We even found the records Vanessa had tried to use. She had crudely edited old PDF files from a clinic I visited years ago, changing the dates and the diagnoses. When my real doctors saw her forgeries, they were livid. They joined my side, providing sworn affidavits that exposed her lies to the core. Vanessa's attempt to paint me as a broken woman only served to show how broken her own morality was. The medical records were the final piece of the puzzle. proving she had tried to gaslight the entire legal system. In an unexpected and frantic move, Vanessa tried to sell the apartment I had been forced out of. Since she had managed to get her name on some of the utility bills and had been living there, she found a shady, quick-buy real estate agent and claimed she had my power of attorney to sell the property. She was trying to liquidate my biggest asset before the court could freeze it. I received a notification from a neighbor that a for sale sign had appeared in the window. I didn't panic. I drove to the property with Miss Randall and the police. We presented the court-ordered injunction and the original deed proving my sole ownership. The sale was halted immediately, and the real estate agent was questioned by the authorities. Vanessa arrived while the police were still there, her face turning a ghastly shade of white. "I was just trying to help her move," she screamed, but the officers weren't listening. They saw the locks she had changed and the boxes of my things she had ready for the landfill. She was caught red-handed trying to steal my home. The caring sister act was dead. The legal battle moved into high gear as Vanessa attempted a final, absurd legal twist. She argued in a preliminary hearing that verbal promises I had made years ago gave her partial ownership of my inherited assets. She claimed that during our grandmother's funeral, I had promised to share everything with her. It was a pathetic, he said, she said tactic. However, I produced a stack of ironclad contracts, bank statements, and notarized letters from the original estate executor that explicitly nullified any such claim. My grandfather had been very specific. The assets were mine alone because I had been the one to care for him in his final years. I showed the court that I had never signed any document sharing ownership. In fact, I showed them the texts where Vanessa had complained about not getting a fair share years ago, proving she had a long-held motive for revenge. Every legal loophole she tried to crawl through was slammed shut. Her arguments were dismantled by the very paper trail she had tried to forge. There were no verbal promises, only her greed and my documentation. She was fighting a ghost of her own making, and she was losing. The day of the final hearing arrived, the confrontation in court I had been waiting for. The courtroom was small, but felt like a grand stage. Vanessa sat at the defense table, wearing a modest, dark suit and dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. She attempted to use her charm and tears on the judge, playing the role of the misunderstood protector. When she took the stand, she spoke in a soft, trembling voice, telling a story of a sister who had lost her way and a family that was just trying to keep things together. I stayed composed, sitting at my table with my back straight. When it was our turn, we didn't use tears. We used data. We played the recordings of her threatening me. We showed the video of her stealing my jewelry. We presented the forged signatures side by side with my real ones. Every misstep she had made, every email she sent from her own IP address, and every recorded conversation dismantled her argument piece by piece. The charm faded from her face as the evidence piled up. By the end of the afternoon, she wasn't crying anymore. She was glaring at me with a pure, unfiltered hatred that everyone in the room could see. Just when Vanessa thought it couldn't get worse, a surprise witness walked through the courtroom doors. Our Aunt Evelyn, a woman who had been distant from the family for years, had been contacted by Mia. Evelyn took the stand and revealed a shocking truth. 10 years ago, Vanessa had tried to manipulate the inheritance of a distant relative in the same way. She had tried to forge a will and isolate the relative from the rest of the family. Evelyn had caught her then, but had kept it quiet to save the family's reputation. The courtroom went silent as the pattern was established. This wasn't a one-time mistake caused by stress. This was a premeditated, lifelong pattern of manipulation. Vanessa wasn't a sister who had made a mistake. She was a serial fraudster who had been practicing on our own family for a decade. The judge's expression turned from skeptical to disgusted. The pattern of behavior was now the final nail in the coffin. Vanessa's history had caught up with her, and there was nowhere left for her to hide. Her past was the key that unlocked the true story of her malice. During a recess, Vanessa followed me into the hallway, away from the lawyers. She attempted to intimidate me, her voice a low, venomous hiss. "You think you've won, Lila? I'll destroy your job. I'll tell everyone you're a liar." I'll make sure you never have a friend in this city again." She was shaking with rage, her mask completely gone. I didn't say a word. I simply held up my phone, which was clearly recording the entire encounter. "Thank you, Vanessa," I said calmly. "The judge was just asking about your motives." Her face went from red to a deathly pale. She realized she had just handed me a recorded confession of her intent to harass and destroy me. Her anger had blinded her, and in her desperation to hurt me, she had confirmed everything we had been saying in court. I walked back into the courtroom and handed the phone to Miss Randall. When the judge heard the recording of her threats, the case was effectively over. Vanessa had committed social and legal suicide in a hallway, and all I had to do was stand there and let her speak. The truth was finally revealed in the judge's final summary. The judge spent nearly an hour reviewing the evidence: identity theft, forgery, attempted fraud, and coercion. He spoke about the chilling nature of a betrayal by one's own sibling and the meticulous cruelty of Vanessa's plan. Vanessa's claims of being a caregiver evaporated under the weight of the documentation, the witnesses, and the recordings. The judge noted that the evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. He praised my patience and restraint in gathering proof rather than engaging in a public spat. He found that Vanessa had acted with clear malicious intent to strip me of my identity and assets. It was a total vindication. Every lie she had told, every post she had made, and every document she had forged was officially labeled as a crime or a falsehood. As I sat there, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. The truth didn't just set me free. It built a fortress around me that she could never penetrate again. The replacement had failed, and the original was back. The fall was swift and absolute. Vanessa lost every contested asset, including the car she had bought with my credit and the property she had tried to steal. The court issued heavy civil penalties and mandated that she pay back every cent she had taken, with interest. More importantly, she was ordered to undergo court-mandated therapy and was placed under a permanent restraining order. Our family relations were fractured irreparably. My parents, finally seeing the full evidence, were devastated and couldn't bring themselves to look at her. She was a pariah in our social circle, the girl who tried to delete her own sister. She had no ground left to stand on, no money, no reputation, and no family support. I watched as she was escorted out of the courtroom, looking small and broken. I didn't feel joy, but I did feel a profound sense of closure. She had tried to take my life, and in doing so she had lost her own. The justice was cold, but it was clear. Moral clarity had prevailed, and the person who tried to replace me was now a ghost of her own making. I walked back into my apartment, the one I had almost lost, and breathed in the quiet. I spent the next few months rebuilding. I restored my finances, cleaned up my credit, and reconnected with the friends who had been misled by her lies. Most of them were horrified and apologized profusely, and our bonds grew stronger because of the truth. I even used a portion of the restitution money to start a community program helping families navigate identity theft and elder abuse, turning my nightmare into a shield for others. My life, once nearly stolen, was now thriving, a public victory grounded in truth and patience. I had walked back into my own life, and it felt better than it ever had before. I learned that you can't always choose your family, but you can choose to fight for yourself. As for the letter that arrived from Vanessa last week, I didn't even open it. I simply dropped it into the shredder and watched the lies turn into dust. Some doors deserve permanent locks, and I finally have the only key that matters. If you were in my place, would you have forgiven or cut them off forever?